Hi, everyone. Welcome to another amazing topic of conversation. I want to thank my sponsors, South Florida PBS, and their new exhibit, art experiential exhibit of DaVinci, which I totally recommend you to visit. Go to their website to get tickets. And if you ever need an office, even if it's for an hour, a virtual office, or on a monthly basis, Alexa's Workspaces can collaborate with you. And wanna be your own entrepreneur? Hermosa Mujer will be able to help you. So, Shimon, thank you so much for doing this interview.
You're very welcome, Gladys.
I know that news now, it's like either at the moment or a few days, and this has been a couple of weeks in the news. But I really wanted to talk to you. For those who do not know Shimon, he's a professor at FIU of the Department of Earth and Environment. And what we wanted to touch on was the article that came out that some of the buildings, especially in Bal Harbor and Sunny Isles, are sinking based on the University of Miami study. And since Shimon, you did a similar study many years ago that coincidentally brought up the Champlain Towers. That is why I wanted to come back and ask a few questions because now the article is being replicated in other countries. And so everybody is like freaking out based on prices. We know that Sunny Isles is a hub or the second city of a lot of Latin American Europeans. And I really wanted to touch base with you on that. So my first question is, what was the similarities when you did the study a few years ago and you found that it actually, the Champlain Towers was flagged and then the building actually collapsed? So why people should be at peace with the study that came out?
Okay. People should always be concerned about the quality of their buildings. So they shouldn't be completely at peace. If there is some information that the building is moving, they should take it into consideration. Now, there are different type of movement of buildings. What this study that came out last month showed that some of the tall building in Sunny Isles and Bar Harbor are subsiding. That's a term that we use rather than sinking. Sinking, people think about things that moving very fast. The subsidence is pretty slow, so
A
the
little, okay.
the rate of movement is pretty slow. We're talking about a few millimeter or part of inch per year that can accumulate over the years, but overall there is not so much movement, but there are movements. People should be aware if the building is moving differentially, if the movement is there's not as a whole like this, but there's some differential movement that should be of a worry. Overall, they should, if there is any indication that the building is moving, should consult with structural engineer to tell them if there is something to worry about or not. Now, usually building, especially the tall buildings that have been built in Sunny Isles, are very heavy. And what happened if you have a heavy structures, it tend to, with the force, with the help of gravity, it tend to pull itself downward. Now, if there are good design and good foundations, and the design actually account for some vertical movement downward, that shouldn't be a problem because it can be part of the design. If there was no part of, there's no such design and the building is subsiding, that can be a problem. Now, if it move as a whole, there is can be slight movements, but usually doesn't generate any structural damage. If there is differential movement, one side moving upper faster than other side, then can be cracks and structural damage into the building. So this study from the University of Miami that was published in December looked particularly on these tall buildings and identified that 30 buildings and more have been moving at different rate, and they found that the tallest building, the tall and the heavy building, are moving faster, and they are pretty new buildings, so it's not surprising. So I say you don't ignore the information, but don't freak out. Consult if it's necessary with structural engineer and make sure that there's no any damage to the building, and if it subsides as a whole, it can be fine.
What was the difference from the study that you did that flagged the Champlain
Right.
with the difference now with the buildings?
Okay, the studies that we conducted 5, 6 years ago and was published in 2020, we used all the data from the 1990s, which collected with satellites from the European Space Agency, also the other study, but from 1993 to 2000. And it shows that only we identified different areas that had been subsided. The focus of the study wasn't about building stability, but to look of areas that are being subsided. And we found subsidence mostly in the western side of Miami Beach, not so much in the western. The only place that we did find subsidence in the western part of the city was that particular building, and that's why we pointed it out, because we weren't expecting to see anything in the eastern side of the city, close to the coast, the Atlantic coast. Most of the subsidence occur in the western side of the city, which is built on reclaimed wetlands, and as a result, there is more movement of the ground over there. So we used in our study, we used different type of data at different years, and the results showed are different because we looked at different observations. So there was only with one building that showed subsidence, and it was the Supplemental South, which in the 1990s there were much less tall buildings in the city. And that was one of the tall building in that particular part of the city. And it was about 10 years old at the time. It was built in the early 80s, and it probably still was affected by subsidence, as our data showed.
So that building the problem with that building was not as much as the subsided, but with structural damage.
Yes, there was a lot of things that went wrong with this building, as we know in retrospect. It was designed in a certain manner, and there was changes to the design when they built it. And then there was most likely, I mean, we detected there was some subsidence, a little bit component of differential subsidence. And but most of the things that caused the collapse were much happened afterwards. There was a lot of neglect in that building, as there were reports that there were leaks from the pool, there were leaks from the top of the one of the slabs into the parking garage. So there were a lot of things that went wrong throughout the life of that building, and not necessarily just in the beginning when it was built and settled into its place by subsidence.
So due to lack of maintenance.
That's what the indication. We are still waiting for the report by NIST, by the National Institute of what is it? NIST. I don't remember the acronym, but
So
supposed
the official has not come out yet.
exactly. They're taking the time because they do a very thorough investigation of that.
So what, for example, and I'm going to put you on the spot.
Mhm.
If somebody calls you on a professional basis that they're going to buy an apartment in one of the 35 buildings that were flagged as sinking, what would you recommend or what would you look for before getting an apartment there?
Well, first, people do contact me every once in a while.
Okay,
Yeah. And I would recommend is to talk to a
that's what I
structural
would have
engineer.
done.
Yeah. To contact a structural engineer and maybe the whoever the building before buying the a unit over there uh, with the building. I don't know what information they can provide about the structural integrity of the building. But I'm not an engineer, so I cannot really provide that information. But the people who do inspect buildings are structural engineers, and that information should be eh, uh, revealed from them or checked with the structural engineers. So that's my recommendation is to get information from the people who are supposed to make sure that the building is not damaged.
From a point of view, what would be, because you're telling me that the sinking is very, well, sinking, no, sorry.
Subsidence.
The subsiding is very low, but through the years it continues very low. So what would be the amount of subsiding that can be like a red flag?
So usually subsidence, there are two phases of subsidence. The first phase that it's the primary subsidence that things are, the soil is being actually pushed downward and it goes in a faster rate. And that's usually in maybe the first 6 years, or maybe 5, 10 years of a building. So it's a faster. And then subsidence can continue it's called secondary subsidence by other processes, but at a slower rate. So I cannot say if there is any threshold that should worry people. If things are subsiding at a fast rate, as was detected in the study that was published last month, that's because they are newer building. In Sunny Isle, they build these tall buildings, they're heavy, and they're pretty new, so they're still settling into their location. If in 10 years they continue at the same rate, it might be an issue. But they can continue subside at a lower rate.
That's the normal part of it.
Yes.
So, based on the study that they did, was there any comparison to the West
And when you say west, which
when they did on the other side of Florida? When you said that the other side was subsiding,
at the west side of Miami Beach,
the west side of Miami Beach, that it's subsiding less.
uh, was well, we found in what our study from that we look at data from the 1990s, we found that there was some pockets of subsidence because Miami Beach was built mostly that part of Miami was in the 1920s, 1930s. They reclaimed the land over there and they built it. So there were still some pockets subsiding.
Reclaiming land, meaning taking land from the ocean?
It was mostly wetlands. There were mangroves, and it
Okay,
was so it reclaiming from the ocean or from the wetlands.
got
Uh,
it.
so they built over there, and there were still some pockets that show subsidence. But in what we found when we analyzed more recent data from the past 7 years, similar to what other studies said, we see that different locations, we see some pocket in other location, also some buildings that show subsidence. But these studies data from the 1990s, we didn't see much of that subsidence continue into present time.
Okay. So that's at least good news.
Yes.
Oh, Shimon, thank you so much for clarifying. I know that since this study appeared, there has been a lot of speculation, and obviously, you cannot say anything about the prices of the apartments because there is no way of knowing if the prices went down, went up, or what's gonna happen in the next 10 years. Just total speculation.
That's correct. I think there were some buildings that they claimed that things are fine, there shouldn't be any problems. That's what I read in the newspaper. And so and some municipalities also went to check these. So I think people looked at it. It got a lot of attention because of the collapse of the Chaplain building.
Correct. Mhm.
And people are more aware of this issue nowadays than they were before. So that's something good. People should be educated about that, but not freak out.
No, correct, because now all the other older buildings are now being recertified
Hmm.
after the 40 years, but I wish they would bring down the time of recertification instead of 40 to 30.
Hmm.
But
I think they did that, no?
I don't think so. I think that they kept at 40, which
Hmm.
was something that they talked about, but now I don't know what's going to happen with the insurance because insurance in Miami now is becoming an issue with the hurricanes and now with the sinking or subsiding. I keep forgetting, but yes. But thank you so much for clarifying. And to everyone, I look forward to another amazing topic of conversation next week. And let's hope that there will be peace in the world. Have an amazing day.
Thank you, Gladys, and to everybody.